Are you tired of feeling overworked and overwhelmed in your tech job? Well, you're not alone. Last year, I hit just complete rock bottom. I was just completely burnt out and exhausted. It was so bad that I actually went to therapy to try and learn to deal with the stress. I learned why jobs feel so soul sucking, and I learned 3 awesome tips about how to properly balance work and my life. So I've got a pretty good job, but the tech industry is notoriously bad about having a proper work-life balance. But luckily for you, I've come up with 3 simple steps that can help you learn how to get that fulfillment that I know you've been looking for, because I was looking for it too. Even better, because this is YouTube and 3 simple steps sounds a lot better than 4 simple steps. I've got a bonus tip for you at the end. So imagine this. Every single day, all you do is wake up, go to work, come home and do the chores, take care of the kids, go to sleep, and then rinse and repeat for weeks and months at a time. Does that sound familiar to you? Because it definitely did to me. If you can't find a way to break up that monotony, it just starts wearing on you day after day after day. Which is why step 1 is to find time for yourself. You have to be able to take some time to do something that you enjoy. For me, I've started doing YouTube videos. Before, when I had a garage, I was doing woodworking and building guitars. Now, your activities could be something completely different. It could be going out on date nights with your spouse. It could be reading or anything in between here. The key is to find something that you love and something that breaks up all the monotony. Finding the time for this is a lot easier than you think. You just have to prioritize it. Now, if you're married like me, sometimes that involves having an adult conversation with your spouse about what you actually need. Imagine that, all this stress could be relieved with just having an adult conversation. It's amazing. Do you know what doesn't stress me out anymore? Editing PDFs. Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, UPDF. And because UPDF asked that this ad specifically be 90 seconds long, and that I do it in my own style, I've come up with a good way to keep my retention from dropping like Wile E. Coyote holding an Acme anvil in the middle of the air. So during this ad read, I'm going to be slipping in 5 different movie quotes. For any of you that can figure out what movie all 5 of these quotes are from without cheating and looking on the internet, go ahead and put that down in the comments and you'll end up getting 10 cool points from me. Now, granted, the cool points don't really mean anything, but you'll get bragging rights down in the comments. Let's see if I can get UPDF to regret asking me to do this in my own style. So here's the interface for UPDF. Let's say we want to open one of our PDF files and I want to start communicating with it in chat. You click down here, and after it uploads and looks through the document, you'll be able to get a summary of all the information, and you can start asking it questions. And if you look down here, and you may be saying, what about that little guy? That little guy? I wouldn't worry about that little guy. Let's go back to the reader, and what you can also do is highlight some information and ask UPDF to summarize, translate, or even explain. Let's try explain. And it tells you exactly what it thinks this means. Sometimes you get the information you weren't really looking for, but hey, Columbus wasn't exactly looking for America, but that seemed to work out for everyone. You can also come up here and prepare a form and to make it where it's easy to fill out, and pull in a text field to be able to add in, and a check box to be able to check. It's so easy that you'll be saying, did we just become best friends? And if you have a document that's just been scanned in and doesn't have actual text information, there's a lot of times where you end up needing to do OCR. So you can come up here and tell it to perform OCR. Luckily, this moves pretty fast, which is good because life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Another feature I want to show you is how you compare it against other files, and we can see what all the changes are. With UPDF, it's easy to remember rule number 76. No excuses. Play like a champion. Now, if you're ready to take control of your PDFs and get rid of some of that work stress, then click the link down in the description. All right, now that we've got that taken care of, let's dive back into the work-life balance in the tech industry. Have you ever been in a situation where you tried to help everybody, but you didn't have enough time, and you just ended up leaving everyone disappointed? This happened to me as early as a month ago. I was supposed to pick up my daughter from dance. I already had this planned and scheduled. But one of my senior VPs ended up needing to have a conversation right at that exact same time for an extremely urgent matter, and this was the only time that they could meet. But instead of rescheduling that meeting, or maybe even just asking my wife to pick up my daughter and bring home a pizza to make supper a lot easier, I decided I needed to try and do both. But because I tried to do everything all at the same time, it all ended up going poorly. My meeting went terrible. I wasn't able to share the documents I had because I was in the car. I looked completely underprepared. I was late to pick up my daughter, and so she was sad. My wife was angry at me. It ended up making our dinner a complete nightmare. And that's why step number 2 is to set up proper boundaries. Now, you need to set up these boundaries in both your professional life and your home life. These are not ultimatums that you set, and they absolutely need to be clearly communicated with your coworkers or your family. The goal is to make sure you have a small list of well-known borders that you're not willing to cross. A good example of a work boundary would be that you're not going to work between 5:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. That leaves you open to be able to still have late meetings, but devote that time to being with your kids while they're awake and at home, and you can actually spend time with them. With a family, you could set up a rule that any of your home-based tasks that have to happen during work hours need to be scheduled in advance. And I know this probably sounds completely overboard because you want to do everything that you can for your family anytime that you can, but if you set that expectation from the very beginning that you're not available during work hours unless you specifically plan it, it helps you keep from disappointing your family. You'll be disappointing them way less in the long run if you just set up these rules beforehand and it's an expectation. Step number 3 is probably the most important step and also the hardest one to accomplish at the same time. And that's because we've conditioned ourselves to see our self-value completely wrong. Okay, think about the last time that you were introduced to somebody new. How did that conversation go? What were some of the questions that were asked? I almost guarantee that sometime in that conversation, probably even at the very beginning, one of the questions that was asked was, well, what do you do? Or what do you do for work? People naturally look to work for a sense of self-purpose. It's important to remember that our self-worth doesn't come from a job title, and it doesn't come from how productive you are. In fact, I want to read you something to make sure that I get it exactly right, because this is important. You have value because your essential core self is unique, eternal, precious, of infinite unchanging value, and inherently good. This idea is called Howard's Law of Self-Worth. And because of this, I've completely stopped asking people what they do when we meet. I mean, I absolutely hate getting this question because every time that I tell somebody that I'm in IT, I guarantee that the next question is about how to fix their computer or if I can help them. So instead, I use this tip from Vanessa Van Edwards. She wrote the book Captivate, but instead of asking people what they do, I've started asking them, what are you passionate about? That gives them room to answer however they want. If they want to identify with their work being important, then this gives them the freedom to do that. Or if they like to talk about their hobby, that gives them the chance to talk about that instead. I think this is a much, much better way to continue the conversation without trying to trap people into a bubble of what it is that they do for a living. It shows them that they're not just a means to an end, and it retrains you to focus on step number 3, which is to stop basing your value on what you do. I have one final bonus tip. This tip is going to help you accomplish the first 3 steps. And that's because it helps you get rid of that fear that is necessitated. I think necessitated is a word. We're going to go with that. It helps you get rid of that fear that is necessitated by having financial stability. Let's face it, if your work doesn't want to respect your boundaries, what recourse do you really have except for quitting or finding a new job? That's why the bonus tip is to make sure you have at least 3 to 6 months of expenses in savings. This gives you the freedom to do whatever you need with your job. If you need to leave because it's too stressful, you now have that option. You have a cushion to leave and go find a new job if you absolutely have to. And that cushion is important in the IT industry no matter what, because you never know when layoffs could happen. Now, if you feel completely burnt out, I highly recommend that you look into therapy. And I know how difficult that can be. It almost feels like you're not able to handle it yourself. It feels like you're giving up a little bit. But I promise you that going to therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's a sign that you know what your soul needs and you're doing the steps that you need to fulfill that. And if you're worried about the cost, you shouldn't be, because if your insurance doesn't cover it, then your HSA will. And even if you don't have an HSA or your work doesn't cover mental health, then look at online sources that are significantly less expensive, like betterhelp.com. This is what I did, and it was extremely useful to me. It made a complete difference in my life. I like to continuously strive to get better. So I want to hear from you down in the comments if there are any tips that you have on achieving a better work-life balance. Maybe tell us what was the most stressful time in your life and how did you get through that? And if you want to see a time in my life when I was completely depressed, check out this video. Completing that challenge almost broke me, but it made for one heck of a story.